joining us to tell us more about understanding teenage mentality. Daryl Joseph, well-known psychologist. Daryl, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Ria. I'm fine, thanks.
Don't worry, I know Ria's on your mind. That's okay. That's okay.
It's because it's her birthday. All right, she could get that one back at me on Twitter later on or something like that. Good morning, Hema.
Listen, we're talking about understanding the teenage mind. And we're not talking about this story specifically, but, you know, young girls and young boys, I think at that age, when you enter high school and you start, I don't know whether you kind of break away from your parents and there's a shift in the relationship. What is a shift like? What do you experience?
Okay. The teenage years are years characterized by transition from childhood, where you're very, very accepting and very, very, led by your parents and led by elders, to adulthood, where you have a sense of self, a sense of independence, a sense of who you are. So it's a period that's characterized, along with all of the physical growth and changes, questioning the values and questioning the things that have been taught and have been put to you, including authority. And then we see in today's world, there's a general sense of not accepting things as is. Okay, we see in various sectors of our society and worldly, people challenging the established ideas, challenging the established authority, challenging the established norms. So along with the growth and natural development which takes place, there's a strong sense of rebellion that takes place in teenagers these days in particular.
A strong sense of rebellion.
Yes.
And we've heard stories where a child would say that she's stressed and she needs to detach, and parents probably just don't know how to deal with that. I had very overbearing parents growing up. It was to the point of like, oh God, I'm embarrassed beyond belief. But how do parents, how do they normally react, and to children when they feel as though their space is being invaded upon?
Okay, I'll make a general statement and break it down. There's a greater need today for parents to nurture and develop relationships with their teenagers. Now, a parent may have a relationship with a child growing up, but then as the child enters teenage years, and it can happen very quickly. With a girl between the ages of, let's say, 10 and 12 or 13, she can become an almost different person. With a boy, it takes place a little later on, but a similar transition takes place. A lot of parents don't understand that they cannot take the relationship they had with their children for granted and assume that the rules of relationship remain the same. With a teenager, you need to not just provide material things for them, but you need to give them more space in terms of having their say on certain matters, at least airing their view. Not necessarily going along with whatever they think, all right? But at least giving them an opportunity to air their view on different things, respecting the fact that they have likes and that they have things that they consider important, and understanding what those things are, and giving them a measure of respect, even while you continue to demand respect from them as parents.
Now, looking at the parents and that sign that maybe, so most parents just don't know how to react to that change.
Yes.
What advice do you have for parents that when your daughter or your son no longer is that loving, give me a kiss, telling you every single thing that happens in their day, but they tell you, I need my space, stop invading it?
All right. First of all, don't be too surprised that it happens. And even if you are shocked, as most parents will be, you have to learn to temper that response and not show it to your children. Because if you show that response to them, if you appear too thrown off, if you appear too unbalanced, it's going to come over as though you unsure of yourself and uncertain of yourself. And teenagers, despite all of the rebelliousness and all of the challenging that they challenge, they still need to have stability, and they still need to feel confident that the parents have it together.
At what point will a child feel as though you can't speak to your parents and then opt to actually leave?
Right. When parents don't listen. Okay? When a child says, okay, for example, I'll use your example, I need my space. And a parent completely ignores that and continues to invade and continues to treat them as though they were still 8 or 9 years old. If a teenager feels that they're not being listened to, they feel that they're not being respected, they will tend to withdraw. And that's the danger. Because
when they withdraw, when they withdraw, I mean, it's one thing to be withdrawn and to kind of be an introvert, but it's a totally other thing to feel as though you are so so consumed and so stifled by your environment that you want to just leave it.
Right. Now, let me finish what I was saying about that withdrawal. They not only withdraw from their parents, but they open up somewhere else.
Okay.
All right? So there might be, I mean, there would be some teenagers who would just become very, very introverted, very into themselves. But more likely than not, what happens is if mommy or daddy is not listening to me, if I can't speak to them, well, guess what? I'm going to speak to who will listen. And that's where the danger comes in.
Monitoring your child's friends and their online activity,
Yes.
their music content, their television content.
Yes.
How do you get that distinction? Growing up, you know, I know that I always wanted to look at Sex in the City, and that's something my mother absolutely hated. But I would sneak downstairs and actually look at it on HBO in the night.
Yes. So I go back to that beautiful word again, relationship, okay? If you've developed a good working relationship with your teenagers, you will be able to give them, you will be able, or they will allow you first of all into certain parts of their world, and you will be able to bridge certain gaps that could potentially occur. So I'll use an example from my own home, because I have one teenager, and I hope my daughter is listening, because she has to remember she's not yet a teenager, all right? I have one teenager, I have one who's nearly a teenager, and a couple of smaller ones, all right? And what we try to do is that we try to be very open with them about everything. Open in ways that maybe didn't even happen when I was growing up.
Because a lot of parents don't know how to address things like, obviously your body is going through physical changes as well.
Yes.
And that conversation about puberty, about sex, about, you know, the way you react to things.
Yeah, we talk about everything. And I mean, you see, you know, when you see a television program, for example, rated TV 14, people don't understand what that means, you know. That really means there's going to be some content in here that might be unsuitable for your kids, so you better be around if they're going to be watching it. It doesn't mean go inside. All right?
Okay.
So that's what I said. What we try to do is that we try to expose them or have them exposed to what we think is appropriate for their age, and try not to be closed or reserved about things that come up. Talk about it. Make it normal, in other words.
Now, there's a flip side to this, Daryl. I was reading on the UK Mail last night. There is a story that is questioning the legal authorities where I don't want to quote the age, a 12-year-old boy actually raped an 8-year-old girl.
I just saw the headline.
And I think that he was exposed. His parents had no boundaries. So they believe that though his environment, he was exposed to sexual images. He may have even seen his parents in intimate acts. And he acted out his sexual fantasies, this 12-year-old boy on an 8-year-old girl.
Yes.
And how do you then define what are suitable boundaries and the level of exposure? And how do you measure that exposure?
Okay, right. That's an excellent question. And I would love a few days to explain it. Just meaning to say that I can't, you know, in a couple of sentences say exactly what the boundaries are. What I can say, though, is that there are age-appropriate boundaries for children at different developmental stages. And a part of any competent parent's tools would be to know what to expose their children to when. What you're talking about there is way overexposure. A little child that age simply cannot handle that level of exposure. Exposure to images and acts, and I mean very graphic things. It's way, way, way too much. These forces are too powerful for a child that age to handle.
Now, parents also, and we go back to the teenager, that rebellion and that questioning, it's very difficult for parents to also, and I know we're talking about the warning signs, but when an incident does happen, you know, even with this case, the initial reaction was, if I were that child's mother, I'd beat the hell out of her. If I were, you know, and you know, a lot of people were genuinely worried. So if your child does something that creates a lot of discomfort for you, or an embarrassing situation to you and to your family, how do you then get that discipline in without further harming the situation?
Okay, well, you can't beat it out of the child, okay? It's not a garbage bag and you're trying to run flies out of it or something like that. You can't beat something like that out of a child. If a child does something like that, they're obviously very disturbed. There obviously are some deep reasons why that's happening. It's not just as simple. You know what we like to do a lot? We like to trivialize things, and we like to come up with very simple answers to complicated problems. So the child interferes with another little child, beat them. Okay, let's beat the child because they're bad and we have to get this out of them. It doesn't work like that. There's obviously a reason why. So I go back again to the importance of relationship. And I will extend the word relationship and say on the whole, family life. We hear our religious people, we hear some of our leaders talk about the breakdown in family life. And you hear it so many times, it become a little bit cliched at times, but really and truly, if our families were functioning properly in this society, more than half of the problems we have would not be there, or they would be eradicated, they'd be evaporated, because children would learn what they need to at home.
Learning what you need to at home. Girls develop at a faster rate than boys. And obviously, as the father of a teenage daughter, and I know that you will be facing that situation as well, what advice would you have for fathers as well? And also, it's an interesting time because mothers and their daughters at that time, they either can get closer or they can get extremely far apart.
Yeah, okay. Very important point to note. Girls learn what a good man or what a bad man is from their fathers. So, as a father, you need to first of all, of a teenage daughter, you need to first of all not be afraid of the fact that she's a teenager and that there are things going on with her that you don't know anything about. Don't be afraid. You need more than ever to be close to your daughter. Not as a friend, not as a partner.
Yeah, because that's the other thing. I have actually had friends whose parents will drink with them. And that was like at the age of 16, 17, 18.
I disagree with that completely.
And they tried to use that approach of being the friend. So you would have the situation where the boyfriends would come home, and that understanding that changing relationship between no longer play partners on the kindergarten field, but they obviously are going through some hormonal changes as well.
In my opinion, that is a transition that's taking place a little bit too quickly. There will be time when your daughter is 18, 19, 20, 21, or in my case, 35. Right? There will be time to sit and drink and have those kinds of adult interactions with your daughter, but I don't know why some parents are so eager to force adulthood on their children, almost as though, I don't know, they think that, well, if they introduce it here, they wouldn't be inclined to overdo somewhere else. I don't know where that thinking comes from. If you're making it okay here, you don't think it's going to be okay outside the home too? Or maybe even more okay than at home? I don't think that necessarily works.
Your closing comments, this is understanding the teenage mind. It's an interesting transition that if you don't do it correctly, your child may be faced with challenges or situations that they make the wrong decision.
Yes, it's a very broad subject again, but please keep the lines of communication with your teenagers open. Understand their world. Understand that there are things that are important to them that may not make any sense to you, but all of us were there at some point, and we liked things that our parents didn't understand either. Don't invalidate the things that they think by dismissing them or ignoring them. Keep the lines of communication open. Be a good example to them, especially.
A good example, a lot of parents talk about that, but do as I say, not as I do. How does that work?
Doesn't.
It doesn't work. Some advice there. Daryl, thanks so much. Daryl, I think I can call Daryl a resident psychologist. Daryl, thanks so much for joining us this morning.